Whenever you crack open a beer or pour a glass of wine, you're probably not thinking twice about it. It's background noise, something you do without a second thought. But that simple act connects you to a habit older than agriculture, older than cities, and older than writing. In fact, it's older than our own species. Our story with alcohol doesn't begin with the first vineyard or the first brewery. It begins roughly 10 million years ago, on a forest floor somewhere in Africa, with a small primate picking up a piece of fruit that had fallen days earlier and started to rot. Back in 2014, UC Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley put forward an idea in his book The Drunken Monkey that's since become known as the drunken ape hypothesis. His reasoning goes like this. Overripe fruit lying on a forest floor doesn't just sit there. Wild yeast colonizes the sugars inside it, kicking off fermentation and producing trace amounts of ethanol. When early primates snacked on that fruit, they got a very mild buzz. They didn't understand what was happening, but it felt rewarding, so they came back for more. Interestingly, some researchers have since found that certain primates, including chimpanzees observed eating fermented African breadfruit, actively seek out fruit with higher alcohol content, which lends extra weight to Dudley's theory. Across millions of years, this wasn't just tolerance building, it was selection pressure. Ethanol-seeking behavior may have literally been baked into primate biology long before anyone thought to brew anything on purpose. So by the time modern humans arrived on the scene, the craving for alcohol was already wired in. What was missing was the technology to make it deliberately, and that took a lot longer to show up than most people assume. In 2018, a team of archaeologists working in Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel, uncovered something that rewrote the timeline. The cave had been used by the Natufians, a hunter-gatherer culture, roughly 13,000 years ago. Carved directly into the bedrock were stone mortars, and residue analysis on those mortars revealed something remarkable: traces of wheat and barley that had been deliberately soaked, allowed to sprout, and left to ferment. That's beer, brewed inside a cave, 13 millennia ago. What makes this discovery so disruptive is who made it. The Natufians weren't farmers. Agriculture as we know it hadn't been invented yet. They were still gathering wild grain by hand, and yet brewing mattered enough to them that they cracked the process before they ever planted a single seed. This flips the story most of us grew up hearing, that humans settled down, farmed, built villages, and only then stumbled onto fermentation. The evidence from Raqefet suggests the opposite order. People were brewing while they were still wandering. Roughly 1,000 years after Raqefet, something even stranger appeared in southeastern Turkey. At a site now known as Göbekli Tepe, ancient people erected massive stone pillars, some over 10 tons, arranged in deliberate circles and carved with animal imagery. And they did it before farming, before pottery, before permanent settlements existed anywhere nearby. For years, this baffled archaeologists. Why would nomadic hunter-gatherers organize the labor to haul multi-ton stones up a hill and carve them with such care? What was worth that kind of effort? Then researchers found large stone vats at the site, and chemical testing turned up residue from fermented grain. This wasn't a small batch for personal use. It was brewing on a scale meant for a crowd. The leading theory now is that Göbekli Tepe wasn't a village, it was a gathering site, where scattered groups converged for ritual feasting and evidently drinking. That raises one of the oldest debates in archaeology. Why did humans start farming in the first place? Patrick McGovern, widely considered the world's foremost expert on ancient alcohol, has argued for decades that the answer isn't bread, it's beer. His logic, turning grain into bread, takes real effort: grinding, kneading, baking. Turning grain into beer is almost lazy by comparison. Soak it, walk away, and fermentation does the rest. If early humans were choosing between the promise of bread and the promise of alcohol, McGovern's bet is that the drink won. And if that's true, farming wasn't the cause of alcohol. Alcohol may have been the reason people started farming at all. By around 7000 BCE, the picture sharpens. At the Neolithic village of Jiahu in central China, Archaeologists uncovered pottery jars containing residue from a fermented beverage made from a blend of rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn fruit. Lab analysis confirmed both the ingredients and the fermentation. This is the oldest known alcohol recipe ever recovered, and it's not primitive. It's a considered combination of multiple ingredients, which means whoever made it wasn't guessing. They knew what they were doing. By the time ancient Egypt rose, beer had become embedded in nearly every part of daily life. The laborers who built the pyramids were literally paid in it, somewhere around 4 to 5 liters a day, functioning as their actual wages instead of coins or grain. That wasn't just tradition, it was practical. Nile water was frequently contaminated, but the brewing process, boiling and fermenting, made beer far safer to drink. On top of that, it was calorie-dense, which mattered enormously for workers hauling limestone blocks through the desert heat. For a laborer, beer wasn't a treat. It was payment, hydration, and a meal in one. There was a spiritual dimension, too. The Egyptians credited the god Osiris with giving humanity beer, and it showed up everywhere: temple offerings, burial goods, even medical treatments, where physicians mixed herbs into beer to treat ailments ranging from upset stomachs to infections. One drink doing the job of a paycheck, a water filter, a meal, a medicine cabinet, and a prayer. Here's the timeline, laid out in full. About 10 million years ago, our primate ancestors are drawn to fermenting fruit, wiring a taste for ethanol into our biology. About 13,000 years ago, the Natufians are brewing beer in caves before agriculture even exists. About 12,000 years ago, Göbekli Tepe rises, possibly built as a gathering place centered on communal drinking. About 9,000 years ago, Jiahu villagers are crafting a deliberate multi-ingredient alcoholic recipe. About 5,000 years ago, entire civilizations, like Egypt, are structurally dependent on it. Alcohol didn't arrive after civilization was built. There's a strong case that it's one of the reasons civilization got built in the first place. Every time you pour a drink, you're carrying forward a habit that predates your species having a name for itself. The ingredients changed, the tools got more refined, the cups got nicer. But the underlying impulse traces back to a small primate reaching for a piece of overripe fruit on a forest floor 10 million years ago. We just eventually figured out how to make it on purpose.